If you live in Japan, your employer will take care of your waistline. In the USA, you won't be able to put a chicken on your head, even if you want to do it a lot. Plus, you'll find a Kinder Surprise egg only in the black market in this country. In Australia, you won't be allowed to touch a light bulb in a public place. Yep, you got it right. We're talking about the weirdest bans and laws in the world. Your waistline can't be too wide in Japan, otherwise you might get in trouble. I'm not kidding. There's a curious regulation in this country called the metabol law. It was implemented to stop people living in Japan from gaining weight. Since 2008, everyone from the ages of 40 to 74 has to have their waist measured by their employer. The main goal of this campaign is to shrink the overweight population by 10 to 25%. If a man's waistline is more than 33.5 inches and a woman's is above 35 and 6 inches, they'll have to take on some serious physical activity, and these weight loss classes will be funded by their employer. If a company repeatedly fails to meet specific targets, namely to reduce the number of overweight employees, they get fined. There have been reports of large corporations getting fines of up to $19 million for missing their targets. Panasonic reportedly gives its employees Metabo check towels with tape measure-like markings. They allow employees to keep track of their waistlines and wipe their tears when they don't meet the requirements. Still, some companies aren't very strict about this law. After all, initially, the authorities wanted to ensure there was a minimum of 65% participation. In any case, it's a mistake to believe that the metabol law bans obesity, making it illegal. In the USA, no one will say a word about the size of your waistline, but if you pull a Kinder Surprise out of your pocket, in this case, you'll have to pay a pretty penny. The thing is, confectionery products that contain a non-nutritive object are prohibited by law in this country, unless this non-nutritive object is functional, like a stick inside a lollipop. A few decades ago, the Consumer Product Safety Commission examined and issued a recall for some Kinder Surprise eggs that had been brought into the US illegally. The toys within the eggs had small parts. The members of the commission decided that this chocolate product was intended for kids of all ages, including the youngest. But since these yummies violated the small parts regulation, they concluded that Kinder Surprise should be banned from being imported into the USA. In January 2011, one person was threatened with being fined more than $200 for carrying a single egg across the US border into Minnesota. And in June 2012, two Seattle men were held for 2.5 hours after returning to the US from a trip to Vancouver. They had 6 Kinder Surprise eggs in their car. They were shocked when the potential fine was announced, $2,500 per egg. And still, Kinder Surprise eggs remain popular on the black market. You can easily buy Kinder Surprise in Sweden, but you won't be able to bring some other products into the country. For example, sausages, butter, chocolate, and even potatoes grown outside of the European Union. Expired products are also prohibited. Speaking of sausages and butter, in particular, this unusual measure was taken to protect the internal market and Swedish agriculture. At the same time, this ban has a broader interpretation of more general import restrictions, like all meat and dairy products imported from other countries outside the EU. As for the products you can't bring home as a souvenir from Sweden, it's definitely surströmming, at least if you're traveling by plane. It's an infamous delicacy made of fermented sea herring. After being caught, the fish are stored in a series of salted water solutions. 2 months later or so, the partially preserved herrings are placed in airtight tins, and they continue to ferment for about a year. 3 days after you open a can of surströmming, the stench of fermented herring will still be hanging in the air. It'll cling to your skin and hair, hide between the threads of your tablecloth. Imagine a can of this stinky goodness exploding on a plane, affected by the changes of the atmospheric pressure in the cabin. You'd be begging for a parachute. And if your wish was granted, you could land in Wisconsin, where it was once prohibited to wear a chicken on your head. Yeah, you heard it correctly. Well, it's not actually clear whether this law ever existed in the first place, but it sure doesn't work these days. But rumors claim that you couldn't enter Wisconsin while carrying a chicken on your head. I mean, why would you want to wear a bird on your head? However ridiculous this law sounds, it's not truly unique. Just one state away in Minnesota, it's reportedly illegal to enter the state while carrying a duck on your head. I guess it makes the border between the two states a bird-free zone. Anyway, these laws are likely nothing more than an urban myth. That's not the end of the chicken story. In the town of Quitman, Georgia, it's officially illegal for chickens to cross the road. The town's legislation officially states that if you're an owner of any domestic fowl, you mustn't allow them to wander the streets of the town or be on the premises of any other person. The law was implemented to make people keep their farmyard birds properly contained at all times and prevent them from roaming on public property. So if you live in Quitman, own a chicken, and let it roam free, get ready for a very unpleasant visit resulting in a large fine. In Victoria, Australia, chickens are totally free to do whatever they want, but people aren't. Once it was illegal to change a light bulb unless you were a licensed electrician. Taking your own light bulb into your own hands could result in a fine of 10 Australian dollars. Luckily, a revision to the 1988 Electricity Safety Act brought a necessary update to this law. According to it, it was still illegal to do your own electrical work if you didn't have a license. But you could change a light bulb and remove a plug from a socket on your own. At the same time, you're still not permitted to change light bulbs in commercial and public establishments, particularly in Western Australia. By the way, another thing you can't do in Victoria is fly a kite to the annoyance of any person or sing an obscene song or ballad in a public place. In Queensland, it's illegal to post fake job advertisements. And in New South Wales, drivers splashing mud on public bus passengers can be fined up to $2,200. Even though Canada is on the other side of the world, it has its own share of weird bans, and one of them is related to coins. In this country, nothing is more important than politeness, and when you go shopping there, you shouldn't inconvenience the cashier by giving them too much change. So there's a legal limit on the number of coins you can use for a single transaction. The Currency Act implemented in 1985 states that one can use no more than 25 pennies, 100 nickels, 100 dimes, 40 quarters, 25 $1 coins, or 20 $2 coins within one transaction. If you exceed these limits, the vendor can refuse to accept them and you won't be able to complain. It's the law. It was actually created to prevent people from paying for expensive stuff with hundreds and thousands of coins and making cashiers count them. If you don't live in Canada, such limitations may seem weird. At the same time, they start to make sense when you read how in 2015, an American student had to pay a $110 parking ticket and decided to do it using 11,000 pennies. He had to visit a few banks to collect the coins in 5 giant boxes.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.